I don't think founders are necessarily the most likable people, honestly. If you just agree with everything that happens around you, you're never going to create something different. So this is a key skill of a founder, which is holding these two realities in your head simultaneously, cognitive dissonance or driving yourself crazy. One is the big vision of the 1% best outcome. If this really, really works, what could this become? And then you have to hold the, what is my top priority today and this week and this month, which is very, very different from this billion people around the world, right? And you have to execute on that, get your team to focus on it, but you have to have both.
Ready to go? Tom, I am so excited for this, dude. We've known each other for many years, but thank you so much for joining me today.
I'm delighted to be here.
Now, I always think that people are shaped by early years in childhood. When you think back to the 10-year-old Tom, how would your parents and teachers have described you?
Precocious, probably. I don't think I listened very well. I was fascinated by lots of different things. I got into computers very, very young, and I was honestly trying to start businesses from when I was about 6 or 7, I think. I stole a bunch of my mum's jewelry and tried to sell it on the street outside her house before she saw me. Literally age 7, I think. It was a strange childhood.
So I always ask founders when I'm investing, how did you first make money? Because I always think that actually exceptionalism shows itself early in life like that. And no one comes out of Cambridge and just makes money at Bain for the first time.
Yep.
Do you agree with that? Or do you think that exceptionalism and entrepreneurialism can be later and actually you'd miss the sway of the founders?
I think it can be later, but often, certainly for myself, I started building websites as 14, 15 and convinced my local estate agent to pay me 300 or 400 quid for a website. So that I do fit that mold, I guess. And in general, I do agree. But, it takes many different types to start companies. I think to be so prescriptive you'll probably miss people, but
I always think like yeses and nos. Yeses can make careers and nos can be incredibly hard and painful to hear. When you think about the yes that you think made you most, what yes was that?
Very easy answer. Getting onto a Y Combinator in 2011. Getting the call. I thought we'd bombed the interview.
Why?
So I was working with Hiroki and Matt on Group A at the time. And we were all ex-management consultants. We sort of all wanted to be startup founders and really all wanted to be the CEO. And we were working on like not a very good idea, which is a kind of student bill splitting app. And in the interview, every question that was asked, one of the founders would answer, then a second founder would like contradict them, and then the third founder would try and answer to try and like square the circle somehow. And it just went on for this horrible like 10 or 12 minutes of just like, it was such a painful experience, and I was sure we'd bombed it. But when we got the call afterwards, it was like a dream come true. And honestly, those 3 or 4 months back in 2011 changed the entire course of my life. I mean, I wouldn't have started Monzo without it for sure. And now I'm back at YC. It feels like...
What specifically was it? It enabled you to see something of the world that you didn't know?
We were play acting before then. We were 3 guys in London who'd come out of consulting, and we were play acting at being startup founders. We'd hired a bunch of interns. We were just running around doing dumb stuff. We had no role models. We had no one who was smart or successful around us to model ourselves after. And being in YC just put us amongst this group of like high ambition, high achieving technical founders who thought they could accomplish something. And then every week, a new founder would come in. Max Levchin would come and tell us about the early days of Facebook, the early days of PayPal. And then I remember the next week, this sort of timid, short guy walked up and said, "Hi, I'm Mark. This is Zuckerberg to give a talk on the early days of Facebook." And it was kind of incredible being surrounded by those people. Whereas in London, we just didn't have those role models. And I think the company would have like slowly sort of died in London. We couldn't raise a single penny of investment in 2011. So YC really gave us that break and raised the bar for us.
What was the most painful no?
Probably 2020, March or April. We'd had an easy-ish time raising. We did a round at $1 billion led by GoCardless, then a round at $2 billion valuation led by Y Combinator Continuity, and then found it really hard to fundraise. and I had 96 no's in a row for that fundraise to try and do a flat round. And we finally got it together, 100 million at a flat valuation at 2 billion.
Tom, what do you tell yourself 95 times in? I fundraise now, and it really hurts me, actually.
It was horrendous. And that's not even the worst no. It was really dispiriting, just saying the same thing over and over again about how I believed this bank was going to be valuable, how we're going to make money, how people were going to deposit their salaries, and people just not believing me 95 or 96 times in a row. I mean, now I feel vindicated. All of the stuff I said turned out to be absolutely true. But at the end of 96 no's, we got these 2 Canadian pension funds to say yes. And they agreed to put in 100 million along with our existing investors at a flat valuation. I thought, the company's we were burning 100 million a year at the time. So the company's going to survive another year. And this was like March or April 2020. And the documents were all agreed and ready to sign on Monday morning, ready to sign and wire. And on Friday afternoon, London went into lockdown. And they phoned me up and said, the investment committee back in Canada has said, every investment's on hold. Like, we're not doing the investment, we're out. We're not investing. And that feeling of like, the world's going into lockdown, there's this crazy pandemic and no one knows what's going to happen. We're running out of money. Our revenue in the next week halved, went down by 50%. And I'm like staring down the barrel of this funding hole we have and spending the next few weeks trying to get any investor to invest at any valuation in like the first few weeks of COVID. That was the hardest by far.
What did you do?
We got existing investors to invest at a significant down round. We spent a long time trying to figure out what was fair. You know, they had the company was in a precarious position, but we all believed it was valuable. And so it was sort of this game of brinksmanship almost, so sort of what is the fair valuation that rewards them for taking the risk, but sort of values the company appropriately. And it was tough, 3 or 4 weeks. We got the round done. It was a sort of 40% down round, I think, about 1.3 billion. And we got 100 million in, and the company survived. But
that note from the pension fund, that is
horrible. I remember the call so vividly. And the person, you know, our champion on the inside was so upset about it. She'd worked with us so hard to get the deal done, and she was distraught. But this sort of nameless IC I'd never met.
I don't think that you can actually ever really have empathy for a founder unless you fundraised. That just brutal. No. And every time you've got to just embrace it and be, do you know what? Next one is going to be it. But I see so many 30-year-old investors at multi-stage funds. They've never raised and are deploying $10 million checks at a time. They just have no idea how crushing it is.
Totally.
Do you agree with me?
I totally agree with you. Yeah, it's I've never experienced anything in life like it, really. Just that process of continually having to show up and be positive and energetic, and over being told no and being given reasons that you're like pretty sure are bullshit. You know, we got the herd mentality at the start of Monzo said, you can never get anyone to switch bank accounts. It's impossible. People get divorced more often than they switch bank accounts. Then we proved that was wrong.
Well, it was like people get divorced a lot.
Yeah, man. And they switched to Monzo at even higher rates, it turns out. Then they said, well, you'll never scale it. The first 10 or 20,000 maybe, but we got to 1 million customers with no advertising. Then they said, oh, but you know, it's just a toy card. It's just a secondary card they use when they're traveling.
Never be the primary account.
Never be the primary account. They're never going to put their salary in. So then we spent the 2 years getting everyone to put their salary in, and now it's something like 60% of customers put their salary in. They're like, oh, well, you have got customers to switch banks, and you have signed up several million of them, and you have got people to put their salary in, but really you'll never make money, will you? And now Monzo is making almost $1 billion a year in revenue. And it's just painful to have had to go through that 6, 7, 8, full credit to the team for the last 3 or 4 years. I left at 100 million revenue or so, and it's now almost 10x that.
It's hard when you meet an investor and you just go, you're just stupid. No, and you have to pretend, yes, that's a really good question. Moron.
I don't think they were stupid necessarily.
Oh, some are.
For sure, there are some stupid investors.
Dude, I just got out of an LP meeting with one of the largest British LPs, and you go, love it, Harry, old chap, but all of this that you're doing, it feels like quite a lot of work. Why don't you do less?
Just work less hard.
Yeah, you don't get it. But moving swiftly on, I do want to talk first about the move, because obviously we mentioned there the challenge raising money in the early days for Monzo in London, and you've recently moved obviously to San Francisco. Why did you decide to make the move with the YC role? And just talk me through that process, because you could have done anything.
So I left Monzo. I took a year or two to recover. Honestly, my brain was really melted. And then I started angel investing in 2021. And I managed to sell some shares in GoCardless, my first company, and I put aside a pot of money that I wanted to put back into the tech ecosystem, specifically the UK tech ecosystem. So I was planning to invest it over 3 or 4 years, and I think in 9 months, I made 76 investments in 9 months, 56 of which were in the UK. And my brain just works that way. I just kind of find something fascinating and I will just do it to an extreme. And so I took angel investing.
Did you write the same size check with every investment?
I got that message, and no, but almost everyone, yeah. There are 2 or 3 outliers that I put bigger checks into that 2 of which I'm really happy about, and 1 of which I was pretty sad about.
What are your biggest lessons from doing 76 checks in 9 months? Like when you review that today, what do you did well, did badly, would do differently?
2 big mistakes, or I wouldn't call them. 1 was a mistake. The biggest mistake was over-indexing on the idea and not enough on the quality of the founder. So as a CEO coming into that, I pictured myself running each business, and I thought, wow, I could do this and this and this, and that's really dangerous.
So dangerous. That happens with so many operators. They're like, I could do sales at this one.
Yeah, and it's not me doing any of it; it's the founder. And so there are a few ideas where I really loved the idea, and the founder just wasn't high enough quality, frankly, and that's something I've learned over and over again at YC. Just picking the highest quality founders trumps everything else. Even if the idea is totally stupid, work with the best founders you can, and everything else is easier to fix down the line.
Do you outcome scenario plan?
Absolutely not.
So you won't go, how do I think this looks? If all of the things go right, is this $1 billion business? Is this not?
I asked, is there a world in which, if this goes really, really well, if this is I thought about this a lot in the start of Monzo. There's like a sort of spectrum of outcomes.
Yeah.
If you look at the top 1% of that spectrum, is there a world in which this could be a multi-billion-dollar company? Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I don't know exactly how it happens. I'm not smart enough to plan it out. But if there's absolutely no world in which that could happen.
Okay, so we have that angel investing as incredibly prolific, Tom. I mean, you worked hard. That was not some time off. 76 in 9 months. That's a lot of company meetings.
Yeah, it was.
Okay, so we have that. Then what?
So then I spent all my money. This money I was supposed to deploy over 3 or 4 years, I went through in 9 or 10 months. And I was finding a lot of work, signing that many documents, simply making the wire transfers for that number of investments I spent a lot of time on the phone with my banker, and it was just painful and it was lonely. So I spoke with Matt Robinson a lot. I spoke with Carlos. I've gone to Index, who are very, very good angels. I was trying to learn the craft, but I found it a lonely process. And so YC serendipitously came along at just the right time and said, would you like to join us? You can invest our money. We've got a finance and ops and legal team that'll do all the admin for you, and you'll have a team of partners around you that you can learn from, which is all of the things I wanted. And they said the only catch is you have to move to Silicon Valley.
Okay, so you have this unique perspective. You built 2 incredible businesses in London, European through and through, living in the Valley now, seeing the incredible exposure that you have with YC. The most common critique, European work ethic is lackluster. The founders don't work as hard and they don't want it as much.
I think that's true. I've seen some data, who knows if it's true or not, on Twitter about the actual time worked by people in various countries. And the US is somewhere in the middle of Europe. Maybe they talk it up a lot. I really don't think it's a work ethic question at all. I think there are other big differences. I think the big difference is one of positivity, optimism, and ambition. So when I was starting Monzo, I was 28 years old. I'd never worked in a bank. People in the UK looked at me like I was crazy. I went to a lawyer to get to do preparation for the regulatory interviews, and the lawyer basically said to me, "I'll do the prep for you, but I don't know why you're trying. They'll never approve you. There's no chance you get approved as a CEO of a bank in the UK." And obviously, I did. Whereas in the US, I tell people I'm starting a bank and they're like, that's awesome. How can I help? I can introduce you to this person, this person. It's like this, the American dream is not a reality that most people get to live, but it is a dream that a lot of people experience. That optimism, that idea that anyone can create anything if they try hard enough is so deeply American, and it's so antithetical to the British culture. Here we've got this awful, like, know your place, don't get too big for your boots. You know, you grow up in a sort of middle-class family and you aspire to be a doctor or a banker or a lawyer. Or I've been talking to students for the last few days at our top universities, and the high status thing to do as a university CS undergrad is to go and work at Jane Street or Goldman Sachs or McKinsey. That's like what our most ambitious...
Still? Still. So funny because, like, you know, EF have been touting that, hey, mindsets have changed.
They're changing slowly. And it is 15 years ago when I started out, being a founder, literally people thought you were crazy. But if you can compare it to Berkeley or Stanford or MIT, like, everyone is starting startups there. Like, every single... You talk to, like, an English literature major and they've got their startup plan. Whereas here I've been talking to PhDs in computer science and molecular biology, and they tell me they go to Goldman Sachs and McKinsey.
Was Monzo doing the US a mistake?
It certainly hasn't worked yet. We didn't, of all of the money Monzo has spent so far, probably only 2 or 3% of that was spent on the US. And it didn't get very much management attention. I mean, it has not been a success so far. And I think taking a kind of cookie cutter approach, taking the product as it is in the UK and assuming the same product will work in the US is not correct. And they've got a great new team. They've just hired a new CEO who has deep US sort of banking and payments expertise. But I think you need to fundamentally rethink, like, what a compelling product would be for US consumers. Because, you know, N26 has failed, Revolut's failed, Monzo's, the first go's failed, give it another go.
Yeah.
It's really interesting that it's just not been a successful mainstream neobank in the US. Chime is good, but it's targeting kind of gig economy workers. And then for the more affluent customers, Chase Sapphire and American Express just have the market sewn up.
100%. I do want to go back. We mentioned, obviously, the angel investing in the 76. We then moved to, obviously, part of the move to SF, as you mentioned, was to be a partner at YC.
Yep.
That is a big transition shift from just being solo angel in London. How did you find the transition from angel to investor in partnership?
So YC has this interesting model where they make you be a visiting partner for 18 months, which is the most brutal job interview I've ever done.
Is it different being a visiting partner to being a partner in terms of what you do, the actual role?
Totally different.
It is?
Yeah.
Huh.
Being a visiting partner is a great apprenticeship, but it feels like a little bit like being a teaching assistant at a university versus being a professor at a university. You know, the professor sets the syllabus and the exam questions and admits the students, and the teaching assistant tries to figure out what the professor is going to do and mirror that, basically. It's training on the job, and I think it's great training.
What did you learn by being a visiting partner?
Oh, I learned so much different stuff from different people. So I did my first batch was with Dalton, and the way he can help young founders find new ideas, really deeply technical young founders without a clue what they want to work on. Dalton can come in and sort of unpick their background and history and find some thread to pull on that they're super excited about and turns into a great startup idea. And it feels like it's their idea, but he somehow like conjures that up out of their background. Michael Seibel, I did a batch with just before I got partnership. And he has this incredible way of giving the most brutally hard feedback you can imagine the founder absolutely needs to hear, and then finishing it off with this like heartwarming chortle, this like laugh that kind of
reassures you.
Yeah, makes you realize
okay.
he loves you deeply. He might think you're a total pile of shit, but he really cares about you, wants you to succeed. So being able to, and that's something I'm trying to learn. I think I can do the harsh feedback quite easily. That comes naturally. But the sort of the warmth and the empathy alongside that, I think I really want to learn from Michael.
So then we make the transition to partner, and now you're the teacher, teaching the syllabus, so to speak. What's the hardest part about that?
Accepting, again, we talked about this earlier, that I'm not in the driving seat, that I'm a coach and a mentor and I give advice, and it's up to the founder whether they want to take that advice or totally ignore it.
Do they take it? Because what I worry about is actually the weight of my words, which is, let's be honest, most founders kind of say, thank you, VC, for your advice, but fuck off and keep writing the check. More than with YC partners, they might actually listen to you, which could be great, but it could be dangerous.
There's huge variation. You're right. If someone blindly accepts everything you say without thinking, not great. If they come to you with every small decision, they're not going to be a great founder. They need to, take the training wheels off and ride the bike on their own. But honestly, we have founders who come to us for advice, listen to it, and completely ignore it. YC is not full of founders blindly following advice. I can tell you that. Yeah, you meet a founder sometimes where the best founders, I'm very good friends with some of them, but you're not investing in people who want to be your friends. You're investing in people who you think are going to build fabulous businesses and work very, very hard to do so.
Do you need to like them to invest?
I don't think so. I mean, it helps. It makes your life more fun. But there are people who are just a little bit scary, It's they're a little bit arrogant, perhaps a little bit obnoxious, a little bit too sure of themselves. And I wouldn't want to spend every day with them. But I just feel like they have something special that's going to build a really, really big business. And that's a bet I would take every day as an investor. I don't think founders are necessarily the most likable people, honestly.
Why? Because
you have to be, in a sense, contrarian. If you just agree with everything that happens around you, you're never going to create something different. You have to. I was not my first job, I was not at all likable, honestly. I didn't know that it was useful to be likable in my job. I didn't suck up to my boss. I told my boss every time I thought she was wrong, and she hated me for it. But I could see everything that was broken in the way we were working. My brain wanted to fix that. And that's not a way to endear yourself to people, but I think it makes great founders, where they're just so annoyed if something's broken, they have to fix it, and they have to tell people when something's wrong. And it can make a shitty employee, but a really good founder. And
my family always say with me, it's not calming to be around you. It's you're just generally impatient, generally quite irritable because you want to change something. Can I say, when you are the teacher, the professor, Professor Blomfield, it's quite a nice ring to it. I'm sorry for the kind of facile question. Do you pick which ones coming in are yours?
Yes.
So it's like a drafting process.
Each of the partners has access to the entire application pool. But if I read an application and I'm the first one to say, yes, that's mine, then I get to interview it. And if I interview it and I'm the sole person who says, yes, we will invest, then it gets money. And then it's my responsibility to work with throughout the batch and throughout the lifetime of that company.
And how many do you choose?
About 25 per partner per batch,
okay.
Roughly. But I mean, you can do more, you can do less. It's not prescriptive. But it's an amazing sense of ownership and accountability.
When you go, that one, I'm interested in that one, how often does the initial interest stay post-meeting? How often are you right with that versus, actually, I met them and it wasn't what I thought?
I mean, statistically, you can figure this out. So I will invite approximately 100 teams to interview, and I will fund 25 of them. So yeah, I will pick 100 that I want to interview. I'll read several thousand, pick 100 to interview, fund 25.
For you, what is it that makes you go, that one, in that interview?
That they teach me something, that they're so expert in their domain and so obsessive that they've thought really, really hard about it, that they can come and, in 10 minutes, show me something new about the industry I didn't know before.
Do you really think you can get enough in 10 minutes?
Get enough in 3 or 4 minutes, but it seems rude to finish the interview so quickly.
See, I love that, and I would hope so. But what if you just have someone who's come from bumfuck nowhere? They do not understand the process. They are brilliant and gifted, but they're just nervous as shit.
That's okay. We adjust for that.
Do you see what I mean? I'm worried that you may miss stuff if it takes sometimes 20 minutes for them to come out of their shells a little bit.
Maybe, but it's not just the interview that we go on. I'd say the interview is 10 or 20% of the entire process. We make them write a long application form. So we get all of their academic and career backgrounds. We ask a bunch of weird sounding questions to try and pull out stuff like that.
What's the weirdest questions?
Tell me about a non-computer system you've hacked to your advantage. So what system in your life have you figured out the intricacies of in order to use for your advantage?
Venture capital.
Yeah, you started, right? And that's the kind of thing we would love to see as what were you, 17 years old or something? Yeah. I started a podcast.
In a bedroom in London.
In a bedroom, I did 400 episodes without making a penny in revenue, but I got this amazing Rolodex. And then I parlayed that into raising a fund and becoming a VC. Yeah. Amazing. That's the kind of exceptionalism that we're looking for in some area of their life. And it might come out through the application, it might be the interview video or the interview itself. But we're looking for that spark that they are not average. Like they haven't just gone through the standard steps of, good high school, gone to Oxford or Cambridge, gone to McKinsey, just like boring all the way through. That at high school they taught themselves to code and built websites for estate agents.
It goes back to what we said, the early signs of exceptionalism.
Yeah, in some way, Patrick Collison creates his own Lisp dialect at age 15 or 16 or whatever, right? It's stuff like that.
Yeah, no, listen, I totally get you. And so then we have 25. They're all in the valley with you, correct?
Yes, we more or less require everyone to relocate now to San Francisco in the dog patch where we have our office and spend 3 to 4 months there.
See, I think that is so important.
I agree.
My question to you is, when you speak to the other partners, especially I guess going through COVID where it was completely remote, do they have any lessons, observations from the complete all remote YC to the all in person?
Everyone's a lot happier now with the all in person. Yeah. There are elements that we have retained of, not very many of the remote batches. So we had a few that were fully remote. Doing demo day with remote presentations, like record or live, but on Zoom presentations with an investor reception in the evening seems like a really good balance of the two of the, all on Zoom versus all in person. Sitting through 2 days of presentations in a stuffy lecture theatre where the AC doesn't work well is not a pleasant experience. Yeah. So that's one thing. Remote interviews. We used to fly everyone to San Francisco for interviews, which seems insane now. I don't know when that changed, actually, whether that was pre or post-COVID. But overall, the in-person experience is dramatically better. Having in-person office hours, group office hours, even cooking for people, like the act of cooking dinner for a group of people you've invested in and then serving them with your own hands. It's just like an act of care in a way that creates just an emotional
sense
bond.
Of trust as well.
Totally.
Yeah, I get that.
I trust you not to give me food poisoning. That when it's just a 20-minute Zoom every week, it's so transactional and empty. I really feel like I know these founders now after 4 or 5 months.
It's that brilliant video of Putin and Xi who kind of both like cheers with the glass and then put it down, and you're like, okay. Okay, so we have the 25. I'm sorry for asking, but I listen to a lot of startup podcasts. I don't hear this. Like, what does the time look like then for you with the 25? 1 hourly meeting per week?
So by default, every week there is so YC is split into 4 groups. So it's not a whole YC, it's 4 separate mini YCs, it's sharded. And you'll get a very different experience in each one of them. The partners are specific and we have our own speakers. So one night a week will be your group event and you'll get someone like Brian Chesky or Paul Graham, or we had Kevin Sister on, the Instagram founder, come and talk to our founders. So you got your Tuesday dinner. You've got pre-scheduled office hours, sort of one-on-one or one company with one partner every 2 weeks, and then group office hours the alternating 2 weeks, which is a really great mechanism. I think was introduced in 2011, where you have 7 to 9 companies who all come for a sort of 1.5 to 2 hour session. And you might and they're organized thematically. So we had a fintech section and a biotech or whatever it might be, ideally all at roughly the same stage of company life as well. And then basically the founders are sort of problem solving with each other. How do you find a banking partner in fintech, or how do you deal with government regulation, or how do you sign your first enterprise deal as a B2B SaaS company? So these group office hours are a really good way to share knowledge between founders and then set goals. So you say in front of these 20 odd people, we're going to go from 25K at ARR to 50K in 2 weeks. And you come back in 2 weeks and like the public pressure, even though it's only 20 people in a room, pushes people to work harder than they ever believed was possible. And it's really those 3 things. So the Tuesday night or the dinners, the individual office hours and group office hours, that's the core of YC. There's a bunch of other stuff. So there's an incredible internal knowledge base, a forum, a user manual on how to run startups. But for the in-person stuff, it's those 3 things.
What do you think are the most common mistakes that founders make in the batch process when they are working with you in that 3 to 4 month process?
Not launching early enough very often. So being too afraid to get something out there and iterate.
I agree. I saw a tweet the other day though saying actually it's never been harder to capture consumer attention than today. And so actually this idea that you can release an imperfect product is not true, because you release that imperfect product, Tom engages with it, goes, that's not great, churns, it's so hard to get them back. I disagreed with it.
Yeah, I think you need to make the scope narrower. So I differentiate between a breadth of functionality versus a level of quality and polish. So I would always encourage founders to go for a very, very, very narrow feature set, like even narrower than they possibly could imagine, and polish it to a very, very high level of quality and get people, only a few hundred people really excited in that really narrow thing, and then broaden out. What way too many founders try to do is they're competing with Google Docs, say, or something, and they try to replicate every single feature of Google Docs to a mediocre level of quality and then release that, and are surprised when no one likes it. So keep your initial product super, super, super narrow so you can build it quite quickly, but keep the quality bar super high.
A lot of founders worry, but I'm going to have a super specialized product then, and I can't sell that big vision to VCs. What do you say to them?
So this is a key skill of a founder, which is holding these two realities in your head simultaneously without the cognitive dissonance or driving yourself crazy. One is the big vision of 10 years. Say the 1% best outcome, if this really, really works, what could this become? And holding that in your head. And for Monzo, it was, we're building a bank for 1 billion people around the world. That's the big vision that you have to hold in your head. And then you have to hold what is my top priority today and this week and this month, which is very, very different from this 1 billion people around the world, right? And you have to execute on that and get your team to focus on it. But you have to have both. If you only have the big vision and you think that's today, you're a bullshitter. Yeah. You're just full of hot air. None of it's real. Whereas if you're too execution focused and you continue that for several years, you build a small business. You build a very successful, or rather a medium-sized small business that's very profitable. It's never going to get big. So you have to have both simultaneously.
How many of the companies pivot in the batch?
20, 25%.
20 to 25%. What do the successful ones do that the others don't?
Pick an idea and stick with it. As simple as that. The worst pivoting founders just can never get the conviction to stick with anything. And they just pivot and pivot and pivot because they overthink it. And I hear this more and more from young founders, like, I'm not sure this is my life's work. I can't commit to it because I'm not sure I'm passionate enough to spend my own. It's like, dude, I'm asking you to spend 6 months on this, not your entire life.
No, but I actually align it's dating. I'm like, no one goes to the first date being like, you are my partner for life. It would be terrifying.
Yeah. Dalton said something very funny a couple of weeks ago. Pivoting is like divorces. Like maybe 1 or 2 is reasonable, but if you're doing it multiple times in a row, maybe the problem is you.
I like that a lot. What are the big challenges for you advising these batches? Is it that VCs come early and you're like, don't take their money, don't take their money? Is it that, what's the hard parts for you?
No, the VC funding thing is fine. I think we've got shutting down continuity. Our growth fund has enabled YC to have a much more collaborative relationship with multi-stage VCs. Previously, it's very competitive. So that's fine. I think everyone behaves pretty well.
Do a lot of your batches get approached while in batch?
100%, yeah. But we set you've got demo day, and the trope was always, everyone raises before demo day, which is true. Like the best companies absolutely always raise before demo day. And so now we've just set a deadline like 2 weeks before demo day and said, you may start fundraising on that day, 2 weeks before demo day.
And they're not allowed to start before then?
We strongly encourage them not to, and we'll be very, very disappointed if they do, because it's not in their interest. Because running a competitive process with lots of people bidding is going to get them better terms. And what happens is nervous founders will fundraise early because they're like, well, what if demo day doesn't go well? So I'll just talk to some early. And then what happens, either the VC looks at you without much progress and writes you off because you've not made enough progress, or they like you so much, they give you a preemptive offer. But the valuation is not as good as you would get by demo day, because that's why they're doing this, right? So they give you an offer of 2 million on, pick a valuation, I don't know, X, right?
10. 2
on 10. And the founder's
good
like, this is
seed price.
This
Tom.
is more money than I've
good
ever
seed price. Yeah? You guys seen 10? You guys seen that? No, not for a while, huh?
No, but the nervous founder is like, 2 on 10, wow, this is more money than I've ever seen in my life. And they can't turn it down. They don't have competitive offers, they can't turn it down, and so they accept this preemptive offer, and they've just screwed themselves. And this happened to a couple of my companies this batch, where a phenomenal, like crazy all-star team, like ridiculous, like every sort of pedigree you'd want, amazing product, profitable, like more than $1 million in revenue. And that just the founder was just so nervous about fundraising that she took, and it was fine. It wasn't terrible. It was fine. But it was heartbreaking for me because I knew that if she just trusted the process and waited till this sort of auction process, she'd get a better round.
Okay, so you mentioned better round, and like kind of the more auction process.
I can see where this is going.
No, my question actually, before I just parlay and just lay into you, is actually, what is the biggest advice that you give founders when they say, how should I think about structuring this round ahead of this 2 weeks of conversations before demo day? I'm one of your batch founders. I have no idea. Help me, Tom.
Yeah, this is an area where I think it's way too easy to say YC's advice is X. YC's advice is custom for every single company. I'll answer the question, but this is with the caveat that this is not advice that we will tailor it much more specifically. The advice we've seen, or the trends we've seen over the last few years, is that founders were getting way over diluted in their seed round. They were giving away 25 or 30% of their company at seed.
That's too much, I agree.
And so keeping dilution slightly lower is probably better for them. I think some founders have taken that way too far, and aggressively will only give away 8 or 10%.
So this is my trouble. I see 10% the whole time, and I'm just like, how on earth do you expect a great investor to really, really be a partner with you when they're going to get 6? Because you also want to have these angels in. It's not going to happen. Yeah,
so I think the reality, like the more nuanced truth, is not YC is telling founders to only raise 10 or 12%. We are telling founders that over diluting at seed is not good for them, and that retaining control would be good for them, and they can make progress towards their Series A milestones with probably $1.5 million or 2 million. And the valuations they might get at demo day are around 15 to 20 million, which roughly ends up at 10% dilution. But if a great partner comes in, if a top tier fund or someone has a specialism they really, really like, and they'd want 15% ownership or even 20% ownership, great, absolutely consider it. I wouldn't rule anything out. And I think this is where it gets misunderstood that YC's rule is only 10%. It's absolutely not true. We've had Sequoia and Andreessen Axel and Founders Fund and Google Ventures and all of these funds leading rounds in companies in the last batch. And it's just about having a reasonable conversation with the founders to say, where's the flexibility and where can we meet in the middle?
I find one commonality. I've done 170 investments now. One commonality is when the seed round is large, they lose urgency.
Totally
and execution speed goes down.
Totally agree.
It's always 5 on 25 is kind of the sweet spot. Do you agree with that?
Yes. We push founders to raise less in general, because most of our companies at demo day are pre-product market fit. They've got some inkling that something's working, but they're certainly not in the scale-up phase. And more capital pre-product market fit does not help. People just end up hiring tons of people, which slows everything down and stops them being so nimble. So really our advice is to raise slightly less money pre-product market fit. Absolutely, once you've got product market fit, pour gasoline on the fire, go. But yeah, raising less early is probably best for most companies.
Do you see bad investor behavior?
Oh, a lot.
Do you?
A huge amount.
I thought they'd be quite worried about that.
They are.
But then why would they let you see?
Because they haven't, it's got better and better and better.
What is the bad investor? Because often people talk about this, but I'm like, I don't see it.
So YC has an investor database, which has 10,000 people in. I'm sure you're in there. We can perhaps look it up. And it has reviews from all of the YC founders that have taken investment from them, both on their process and what they would like to work with after the investment. And it has a rating. And all YC companies have a huge amount of inbound investor interest. And before they book meetings, they will look each investor up in the database and see, have you treated founders well or have you not? And if you've not treated founders well, you're not getting meetings with YC companies. And some investors go, why is everyone ignoring my emails? It's like, well, dude, because you've fucked over these companies again and again and again. Very typical bad investor behavior would be something like making a binding handshake offer. We have a protocol on this, I offer this amount on this valuation, and yes, I agree. And then not wiring the money. Or just saying, of course I will only wire when the round's full. Let me know when you've got the full round completed and then I will wire. It's like, you've signed it safe, you have to wire the money straight away. Or being extremely onerous in terms of like, you must meet with us every 2 weeks or whatever. Like, I want to be helpful. and being a little too helpful.
The biggest annoyance to me is actually when people don't understand the weight of their check. And what I mean by that is like when a small 50 or 100K check wants 10 diligence meetings and then wants 15 references. And you're
totally.
like, dude, you're a fucking addendum to this round.
Yep.
Like, know your place.
Yeah, and we are actually going to start publishing this data internally for our founders, where we know how many...
Can we check it first?
Absolutely. This is what I'm doing right now with another of our partners, Brad. We have data on how many meetings each VC takes, how many investments they actually make, and what the check size is. And so we can tell our founders what is the percentage chance of conversion and what is the expected value of each meeting.
You got like the most intelligent routing system then, where you're like, hey, for those that want the easiest cash,
Totally.
quickest, the highest converting
Absolutely.
checks are these.
Here are these 20 investors. If you meet with Sequoia, Andreessen, or Founders Fund, it's going to have a 3% chance of conversion. And on average, they're going to invest 2.7 million. I'm making these numbers up, but we have that data now, and we are going to all of the top funds to work with them to make sure their understanding matches with our understanding, that they actually have made 3 investments, they actually did take 163 meetings, and then we're going to publish the data to our founders.
Are the companies that get the supremely hot rounds the ones you think will? In other words, can you predict the ones that will be hot?
Yes. Yeah.
And that's because of founder, space?
Everything, combo of traction, it's not one for one. You can't predict 100% of them, but directionally, yes.
Do you ever have one where you're like, that one's going to be a rocket in terms of investor attraction, and then it's like crickets? Or not crickets, but not.
Not really. Like sometimes, and then the vast majority of YC companies end up raising their target anyway. Some might take a little longer than you expected, and some might go very fast.
Yeah.
But something like 80 or 85% will raise their full sort of target amount, which might be 2 or 3 million or something like that.
And then for you, I'm sorry, I'm just interested. Like you have these 25 batch, which you really craft and work with. You have the carry on that batch.
It's all shared.
It's shared like a equal partnership.
Yeah.
Fascinating. And so do you get involved with other people's partners? Like,
absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
I think if it was more, I mean, you want to pick the best companies for pride, and also it's more fun to work with better companies than worse companies.
Do you stack rank each other?
No.
That would be interesting to see.
You'd need a long time period to really know.
You would, but you could get interesting signals from who raised the most from the best, the amount that converted that didn't.
Yeah, we have that data and we ignore it because it's just so easy to choose. Like it's not
easy to gamify for sure.
Yeah, who cares that you raised 10 million from XYZ investor? We don't want to incentivize people to raising that amount
If you
of money.
could change anything about the YC process in that 3 to 4 months, what would you change?
The thing I am trying to change, I ran an experiment last batch where I randomly matched groups of 6 to 8 founders across groups for dinner and just sent them out for dinner. It turned out to be unbelievably difficult to get a group of 8 founders to organize anything for themselves. It was astonishing. And so this time round, we are doing way more of the curation where we'll literally tell you, turn up at 6 p.m. at this restaurant and you will meet 7 random YC founders and you can chat about your startups. So the thing that I found most valuable as a founder in London was meeting groups of peers that I would then share experiences with. So we're trying to curate those experiences for people so they get more of a community. If it works for the batch, we'll start doing it for alumni as well. So you can say, I'm in London, and we're going to do 20 YC dinners next week of all the YC alums so they get to meet each other and just make that network of YC even more powerful.
Got you. I do want to move to the theme of the day, which is obviously AI. I mean, every YC company is also an AI company now.
70%, I'd say.
70%. Yeah, there we go. Is the hype surrounding AI a hype cycle, or is it justified?
I think it's justified. I am so excited about what the future holds. I was really annoyed actually back in when I was starting GoCardless and Monzo. I was so annoyed that I wasn't around for the dawn of the internet, 95 to 2001. I was like,
I always heard about Netscape in 95 and I'm like, fuck.
Yeah.
-1.
We're way too late. It's just like, it felt somehow like all the ideas were obviously not taken. That's just a silly thing to say.
Yeah.
But
low-hanging
we
fruit,
missed out. We missed out on that time. And what I actually realized is that Monzo rode the smartphone wave. Smartphones and apps were 2010 to 2020, say, and that was the predominant technological wave. We are now going through another, which is AI, which is going to be as big as the internet, I think. Really, it is a technological revolution that I think will impact every part of our lives in small ways over the next year or two, and in very, very large ways over 10, 20, 30 years. And I think it's going to transform every industry, and there's so much opportunity to build right now.
There's kind of two opposing camps to this, Tom, I think, which is like having interviewed many different people on both sides, which is really interesting, actually, having the different perspectives. But those that think it's like a sustaining innovation, which is like an add-on to Adobe, to any of the Notion, all the existing, and it enables a better experience for existing products. Yep. And then there's others who say it's disruptive and it creates entirely new categories and markets.
I'm going to cop out and say kind of both. Like, I do think big incumbents with distribution who can add sort of AI copilot functionality will make their products more effective. But I think there are huge new categories that will be created as well. I'm really excited to see what it does to consumer behavior, because consumer companies tend to be winner takes all or winner takes most, and they tend to be created when a new technology shift happens, so internet or smartphone. And we haven't had a lot of exciting new consumer companies for like the last 5 or 6 or 7 years, because they all started in like 2011 to 2015. Clearly AI is that technological shift, and I think it enables a whole generation of new consumer companies to be created. And I don't even know what they are yet, but I think we're going to find out the next. They're going to be created this year and next year and the year after.
Okay, I just want to then kind of unpack that a little bit, because there's obviously the sustaining versus disruptive, and then there's also kind of infrastructure versus application layer. If we start on infrastructure layer, we see so much money going into the core providers today, your OpenAIs, your Mistrals, your Anthropics. Do you think there's money to be made investing in foundation models?
I don't know. And I sort of don't really have a horse in that race. What I hope, the best case for me and for YC probably, and for you, and like humanity, I'd argue, is that roll forward 10 years and there are like 5 or 6 foundational model companies, and they're probably attached to Google and Microsoft and Amazon and Facebook and Apple because they have the funds to power them. And they are all about as good as each other. It's like how, GCP versus AWS versus Azure, they kind of do this, slightly different tweaks, but there's great functionality and commodity pricing because they've all like beaten each other down on price. And that is not so great for the investors who invested in those companies, but great for the world, great for humanity, great for startups.
I think this is exactly what happens, which is they realize that actually the cloud services is where the cash cow is. You acquire them, it's like the tools that help you acquire amazing customers. But absolutely, they're kind of acqui-hires to aid the core cash cow business.
Yep. And maybe the LLMs themselves are kind of part of that infrastructure, but I see them being in the case that's good for YC and for most of the world, I think, is that they're more or less equivalently good, and you could build on any of them, you could swap any of them out. I think the dangerous case...
I'm insanely impressed. I was meeting a company the other day and they were talking about how quickly they swap out different models on a real-time basis for different use cases. It was a language learning app, and it was literally like we used 12 different models at once and vary it in real time.
Because you can, the US has made like non-competes even less enforceable now. Talent is going to jump between these places so quickly. So you discover an innovation at one place, and if weeks or months later it's replicated everywhere else, I think. Yeah. Unless you really believe that raising $1 trillion to train your biggest model is going to be the advantage. Who knows? But I think it's quite dangerous to the world if there is one singular godlike AGI that we're all beholden to. Okay,
so we move then to like the application layer that sits on top of foundation models, which is where I presume you're excited.
Yeah.
Why is that? Because most, it's a wrapper, it's non-sustainable. Why are you excited?
There are clearly some wrappers. Mm-hmm. If you can build it in a weekend at a hackathon and make a bunch of money, probably not defensible. For most businesses building on top of these models, I see it, you can describe the last generation of startups as like MySQL wrappers or AWS wrappers or something. Like, it's the same kind of logic applies. I think where the sustaining value lies is identifying an industry, deeply understanding the regulation in that industry, the tooling, the language, the all of the training, how people sort of work and behave and act, and tailor your software to fit into that industry in a way that's extremely deeply embedded. And most people working in AI now, most people building application layer stuff in an AI, say it's 80 to 90% traditional software with 10% AI. It's working in construction, figuring out how Procore works, or how the Salesforce CRM works or some Oracle database. And like, I don't think OpenAI is going to come and steamroll like the construction company, AI companies, because they're not going to deeply integrate into the processes and software that exist in each of those industries. So I really believe everyone who works with a computer will have an AI co-pilot assistant thing in the next 2 or 3 years, whether you're like an oncologist or a law professor.
The thing that worries me with a lot of it is actually that you see a lot of these service providers be like, oh, we have a better user experience, we've got a better design. And I'm just going, I get it. But the trouble is you don't have distribution. And what I worry about is distribution trumps product in this world, which is where Microsoft Office just bake it in. And because of Microsoft's distribution capabilities into all, was it oncologists or dentists or whatever we want to use as that famous dentist example. Fucking dentists. Poor dentists. But do you see what I mean?
I do, but I don't agree. Because I think Microsoft Office, like by definition, has to be a general product. It will be the best word processor for sure, but it's not going to be the tool that the dentist is actually using to write their clinical notes after a meeting. It's going to be, that is a specialist piece of dentistry software, or the 3D modeling software that some architect is using to design a skyscraper. Microsoft Office it will benefit for sure Google Docs and Microsoft Office as a general document writing thing, but one of our companies was called Solve Intelligence, which is a tool for patent writing. So taking scientific inventions and papers and turning it into really, really high quality patent submissions that are very likely to be accepted. I don't think you can tell me Microsoft Office is going to help write those patents.
No.
So I think that it's that vertical focus.
Was that an incredibly hot company?
It was a normal hot YC company.
In my head, like investor head, I'm like, I can totally see investors jumping all over that.
And that's the bread and butter of the stuff I love to invest in. It's like find a vertical where you are a domain expert and you nerd out on it really, really hard. You can talk to these people and build something that's so specifically tailored for their needs.
Do you find the advice that you're giving these startups is different to the advice that you gave in a completely pre-AI world?
Big companies are now more willing to spend money on this stuff than they ever were. So the previous advice of like go and sell to other startups, I think is actually not good for and maybe a dev tool startup, you go and sell to other startups, but in general, I push companies, B2B SaaS companies, to start mid-market and go up as quickly as they can. Every manager of every big company in the world is being asked by their boss, what is AI going to do to our company? And many of them do not have a good answer, and they're looking around for startups to help them. And for sure, it's innovation budgets and proof of concepts and all this stuff. But where it works, they convert to real contracts. I've seen companies go from 0 to like $500,000 or $1 million of revenue within the YC batch with really, really big companies, like Fortune 500 companies, and turn them into recurring contracts. This is real. This is saving people so much time. It's astonishing.
Do you think you know that you're a good investor now?
I don't think I am. I don't know. Do I think I'm a good investor?
I was having this chat with Tom Hume and he was like, dude, I just don't know if I'm good at this after all this time.
I don't know either. I think I'm a good founder and operator. I've got enough data for that, I think. I'm not sure I'm like that temperamentally suited to being a coach or a mentor. You know what I mean? Like I still have that fire of like...
Do you want to go back and found another company?
Absolutely not.
Really?
I love it, but it ruined...
my life.
It ruined my life in a way. Like honestly, like I love the earliest stages. I love working with smart people. I love building stuff. I love having my hand on the steering wheel and making decisions quickly and feeling the whole company moving at pace. Like that's just exhilarating. I get so much like joy out of it. And I think I'm good at it. The problem is when you're good at that stuff, it turns into a big company. And then you have to run a fucking big company, which sucks. It really, really
What
awful.
sucks most?
Particularly with, I mean, I'm so proud of Monzo. I think it's an amazing product and company. But that was like startups on hard mode because it was regulated.
Yeah.
So we built a product we thought people loved. Customers gave us incredible feedback. It was profitable. And still the regulator comes in and says, no, this is really bad for customers. Despite all the customers loving it, it's actually really bad for them and we have to protect them. And so you've got to change all your plans. It was just like having this random team rolling in hand grenades every 2 or 3 months, you know? You think you're talking to customers and doing the right thing, and then you just get blown up all of a sudden because the regulators decided for some reason it's not treating customers fairly. It was astonishing.
What advice would you give Nick at Revolut on getting regulated?
I'm not sure Nick would take any advice I gave him, so it's totally irrelevant.
I thought that would be such an interesting one.
I don't know. I think Revolut have acted in a certain way for so long that it is hard for them to change course, really honestly.
Yeah.
So we intended to be a regulated bank from the very, very start. We acted like that. And it now, 10 years on, we are reaping the rewards of that.
Final one. You mentioned there about kind of the impact that it had on your life, obviously founding companies. And I've heard you talk about the ability of balance before. And I've never agreed with you on this one, Tom. I'm really sorry. I'm like, the reason why Monzo and GoCardless were successful is because you didn't have balance.
Yep.
And nothing great is created actually with balance. You have to be exceptional. That's what makes it a great.
I agree over a short to medium time period. I don't know how founders do it over a 10 or 20 year time period, because I cannot work for that intensity for that long. The first 2-3 years at Monzo, we were working like crazy people. I mean, the first 50 people at Monzo were so spectacularly talented and gave, like, I'm friends with so many of them now still, and they bear the scars of it, you know? They like worked so hard and gave part of themselves to this company to make it exist. And it was really annoying actually when we got to like 1,000 people. People are joining and like demanding work-life balance, you know, asking when we're going to do a 4-day work week. And the first 50 or 100 people are going, what the fuck is going on? Like, we've given like, it feels like we've given limbs to this company. And then these newcomers are demanding like, you know, they want to work 25 hours a week or something. Like, what the hell's happened?
Did you fall in and out of love with what you did over that time? I think people always say like, oh, fans, you're always so in love with what you do. And I think that's a bit of a lie.
I loved the product all the way through, but by the end I hated the company because it got so big and so over-regulated in my opinion, and it wasn't as simple as identifying something customers wanted and building an amazing product that they would pay for. That was not enough. There was this other whole like crazy language that we didn't speak called financial regulation. You had to keep these regulators happy as well. And I was not good at that, really honestly. And I think TS, the new CEO, and Sujata, the COO, are spectacularly good at that, as well as maintaining the culture and the product. And they've just done such a good job taking it over, you know, when I left it over the next 4 years that I couldn't have done.
Final one, I promise. Do you have a challenge in terms of loss of identity? Like, I don't go on holiday because you're detached from work. And you mentioned me starting at 17. I've never ever done anything else but this. So it's really uncomfortable actually to have 10 days or 7 days with nothing.
Yeah, this was a big problem for me when I was thinking about leaving. The sort of year or so before I actually left, I couldn't imagine myself and the company not being the same thing, and who I would be or what I would be or whether I would be relevant anymore. And I was worried the company wouldn't survive without me, which was a very arrogant and untrue thing to think. It thrived without me. And I had to rebuild my sense of identity, my ego. And honestly, going to America where no one knew who I was and joining YC as basically an intern was incredibly humbling and really positive, because I had to like rebuild my entire self-image. At Monzo, anytime I said anything, a whole team would like spring into action. And even if I didn't intend them to do it, I'd be very careful what I said, because literally I'd come back 2 weeks later and find 30 people had gone off in crazy tangent. And I joined YC and I say things and people like ignored me. And not in a nasty way, but I was just like, just another person, right? I was a visiting partner, I was a teaching assistant. My ideas didn't matter that much. And that was so humbling. It was great. Honestly, really, really great.
Right, we're going to do a quick fire. So I say a short statement, you give me your immediate thoughts.
Let's do it.
What's the biggest takeaway from PG?
Relentless optimism. He will meet with founders and get so excited by their idea and imagine the future they could build if this just works. And the 1% chance it works, how it's going to change the world. And he'll get so excited. He will excite the founders themselves, and they will come out with way more optimism and self-belief than they went in with. It's a superpower. It's astonishing to see how he can jazz people up and just get them so driven and motivated. And it's something I really want to emulate.
It's really interesting, the unlocking investor enthusiasm gives to the willingness to open up of the founder.
Yeah, totally.
It totally makes sense. If you have a pessimistic, well, this went well, this went well.
And it's the British culture, you know, it's so easy to trash an idea and be kind of sarcastic, and it's great, makes for great comedy, makes for terrible startups. You need that like boundless energy and optimism, and it's not a natural British state, but it is Californian.
You can start one company again and choose a board member. Who do you choose as a board member, and why them?
If I was doing fintech, I would choose Mickey Malka from Ribbit. They finally invested. Ribbit, I don't know if this is public, I should check.
What, in Monzo?
Yeah.
I love Mickey.
Like the quality of thought that I got from Mickey and the deep personal connection I felt with that guy was just on a different planet. And I'm sad I haven't had the chance to work directly with him.
Yeah, no, listen, I think he's incredible. What investor would you never have on the cap table?
Probably SoftBank. I had a very unpleasant experience with the SoftBank London team. Just a bunch of pretty arrogant, like Deutsche Bank traders turned venture capital investors. They were not fun at all. I met tons of really bad investors through my time, honestly.
What was the worst investor meeting you had?
There was one, and I can't actually remember his name even. I shouldn't name him, even if I could remember. He was an intro through one of our existing investors, and he, on the first call, was like raving. He's like, "This is so exciting. This company's great. I really want to be in. Reserve like 10 million. I want 10 million allocation. Will you give me 10 million?" And we're like, "Yeah, yeah, sure. Like we're raising 100 million, but yeah, we'll earmark 10 for you if you're that keen. Like go through diligence." And we got the rest of the round together over the next few weeks. And like a week before signing, he was like, I've been looking at your numbers, and the cohorts really aren't as good as you said they were, and really this valuation that we agreed doesn't really make sense anymore, Tom. And really, I agreed at 1, but actually I'm only going to do this at 500 or something. And it was like 3 days before signing the term sheet, and I was like, okay, no worries, I'll just give your allocation to someone else, thanks. And he's like, no, what are you doing? I was like, you're backing out. Like we agreed on something, you're backing out. Like you've not got it. And he went fucking apeshit. And I heard from another investor, this is just standard practice for him. He will go in super, super, super happy, like supportive. I really want in. And then at the last second, he'll be like, oh no, there's actually something wrong. Just to try and squeeze 20 or 30% out of the round.
I don't understand why I do that, because you've got to have ball control on the round to squeeze it 20 to 30%. Do you see what I mean? So it's like, as if you're a 10 million of 100 million, you're not even going to be able to do that. Like even if you wanted to, you couldn't without carving out a separate deal for him.
Yeah, I don't know what his plan was. It was really stupid. And I was just like, I don't want to work with you. And he has been blacklisted he's tried to invest even after I left. And to their credit, the Monzo board have said, we're not working with you. And I was just like, fuck you, dude. Don't treat founders like that. It's not cool.
Okay, which is the most helpful angel? I know angels are different for different companies, obviously for different, but like the one where you're like, they're amazing. So like, Guy Pajani at Snick, for me, consistently in companies I've invested in with him, founders love him.
For me personally, it was Eileen Burbidge. I mean, not an angel investor, but our seed investor was the most personally helpful. We were obviously her biggest position. She stood to make a lot of money, so like economically it makes sense. But she went above and beyond. I mean, she was like offered for me to go and stay in her house, cook me meals. She would, when we lost a chief people officer, she came and did an exec job at Monzo effectively for like 4 days a week for 6 months. She like put her portfolio to one side and just said, I'm just going to come and turn up every day and work with you at the company. It was just astonishing. So Eileen is, for me, head and shoulders above everyone else I've worked with.
That's amazing to hear. Gary's clearly fucking great. Like when you see
Gary
him,
Tan?
Yeah. When you see him as CEO of YC and what he's done, the excitement that he brings, especially around demo day, when you see him taking photos with the old school camera and just the joy that I didn't mean it horribly, has brought back it then to the YC community. What do you think makes him so good as a CEO of YC?
I think YC has changed a lot in the last 2 years for the better. And I put a lot of it down to Gary. He was there in the early days. When I was there in 2011, he was, I think, a part-time partner. He helped us design our pitch deck for GoCardless in 2011, and he was taking the photographs back then. So I think he like experienced YC at its purest, at its core. And then really honestly, under Sam Altman, I think it expanded in a bunch of different weird areas, and it just lacked strong, and Sam was distracted. He was doing OpenAI from very, very early on. And so to have a CEO now who is whose full focus is the batch. It's a core YC. It's not some growth program. It's not some international program. It's not creating AGI. It's the core YC batch that Gary has experienced and loves and cares about. I think has made it great.
What is the single biggest threat to the YC model?
Complacency, I think. We could coast on our laurel, rest on our laurels, I guess, not to mix metaphors, for quite a long time without realizing it.
You could. I think the decay rate would take a long time, like a decade plus.
Yeah. And then we just recruit bad partners who give bad advice, but continue to recruit reasonable companies, and they will continue to fundraise because of the brand. But then after 10 years of decay, we realize it's all fucked. And so just being really, having a really high bar for the partners we hire and a really high bar for the companies we fund, so that we're making YC stronger and stronger and stronger every batch and not risking this like decade-long decay.
Which founder is not a YC partner, but you'd love to have them as a YC partner?
I mean, I think either of the Collisons would be incredible. I think they're a little bit busy at the moment. I mean, Brian Chesky, maybe as a second act, he could come to YC. He speaks at every batch event and his advice is just phenomenal.
Do you care about money?
Now that I have more than, I have a surplus of money, clearly, not really. Like I cared about it when I was younger, for sure. I really...
Does it make you happy in the way that you thought it would?
No.
Was that a hard moment when you realised? Because you do chase it to a certain extent. People do chase it. And then you get it and you're like,
I chased success and money. And
Did you know what success was?
Yeah, like building a big company. My dad, when I was very, very young, created his own company, and it was drilled into us from a young age that being successful in life meant being rich and being successful. And so I had this huge drive to create something big and to, that external recognition and validation. And the money went with it, but it wasn't the money alone. It was success. And it drove me to do Monzo and drove me to stay at Monzo for a long time after I was happy. And in the years since, it's kind of gone away. It's weird.
Is it freeing?
Yeah, it is. It really is. Yeah. I don't feel like I have to create another... I felt compelled to create Monzo. I really did. And now I keep getting the urge to build something because I really, really love building stuff. But I don't have the urge to build a big company. I don't want to run YC. I would not want Gary's job. I have been there. I've had the stress. I've had the packed calendar. I do my work. I get to go home at the end of the day. I shut my laptop and I can focus on I have I do all of the cliched founder sports. I love cooking. I bake. I do pottery. I hike and cycle. I love that part of my life so much. And I'm the happiest I've ever been, I think, in the last 6 months, because I have the work that keeps me intellectually stimulated, but tons of hobbies and friends. And I'm not striving for it like external validation as much. I mean, I still am, I get a buzz when I get a tweet that goes viral, or I'm on, a podcast, or in the, the BBC asked me to go and talk on the radio. It's like a little bit of
course, you're human.
Rush.
Yeah.
But I think it drives me much less than it used to.
What do you miss most about London?
Friends and family. Yeah. And a big part of me leaving, honestly, was my friends all got to the stage of life where they were getting married and moving to the suburbs and having kids.
It makes a big change to friendships. Kids are wonderful, obviously, but I really noticed with my friends, when the kids happen, the friendships fall away.
Totally. And it happened in like a 2 or 3 year period where I genuinely found myself in London thinking, I don't have friends to hang around with now. I've got to make a new friendship group. And that for me was a catalyst to move countries. It's like, if I'm going to have to make new friends, I might as well take this opportunity to move to a new country as well.
Is it difficult making friends in the US?
No. I find it incredibly easy. Spencer from First Minute?
Yeah, of course.
Spencer is like the most connected person I know in the world. And whenever I go to a new city, Spencer will like herald my arrival and send like 3 or 4 or 5 WhatsApp messages, and I'll be met by a group of friends. It's crazy.
So nice.
He's such a lovely, warm person in that way. And so my best friends in San Francisco, he introduced me to, I've been in New York I'm spending the next month in New York. He's introduced me a bunch of people there. So I have him to thank for a lot, but in general, no, I love hosting. I love meeting new people.
10 years time, final one, it's 2034. Where do you want to be then? Is Tom back in London running a fund? Is Tom not running another company?
Hopefully not running another company.
Would you like to run a fund?
Not really, no. All of the funds I've seen have like pretty horrible politics, and I think YC has the least politics of all of them. I don't want to run YC. I'm very, very happy not having Gary's job. If I'm still doing YC, that would be great. I would like to be able to split time between San Francisco and New York and maybe the Caribbean a little bit. I love sailing, and maybe London. I would love a long-term partner, and I think I'd like kids. My brother has 2 children, and they're 1 and 3 years old. And I went in, before I came to work today, before I came into London, I went into the living room and the 2 of them were sitting there playing, just like very, very blonde, very cute 1 and 3 year old. And the eldest runs up and says, Uncle Tom, I've drawn you this picture. And it's like my heart melted. It's like, oh my God, I can see what these things do to you now. And so, yeah, if I meet the right person, I'd love to have a family. Yeah, like if over the next 10 years I met someone great and we had a family, that would be happiness for me over creating another billion-dollar company. Like, who needs another one of those?
Yeah. Tom, I've loved doing this. Thank you for letting me just pepper you with questions. This has been such a joy.
Thanks, Harry.